Hi everyone, welcome to another DSLayer. You're with Joshua Fletcher again, and today we're going to be going into more detail on our analytic bundles. So if you've seen the first episode, we talked about the claims optimization for insurance. Just to refresh your memory, it's available at this page here. A link will be in the show notes. And effectively we downloaded an analytic bundle that contained a data model with sample data, a universe, and then dashboards and Webby reports built all on top of that insurance data. So that was one of the types of analytic bundles that you can access, and that contained data model and universe. What I want to look at today is the analytics data model for starter pack for telco and utility. Now this one's actually a lot more involved than the previous one. This doesn't contain any BI content, but it contains a really robust industry model and is built using SAP PowerDesigner. And then it deploys by default into Sybase IQ. So rather than show you the complete end-to-end walkthrough, I want to show you all the steps to deploy it, and I've already deployed it, and then talk a little bit about how you could then implement this and then take it further. So the first thing to do is download it here, and that's free to download. You will need licensing for PowerDesigner and IQ, but I've used trials for both, so you can deploy it using the trials. You can see there's 30 meg, so if I just go back to my desktop, here is the folder when it's unpacked. So the first thing you can see here is that we've got a PowerDesigner model, and I'll show you that in a second. We've also got some documentation. We have both the installation guide, which I'll pull up, documentation about the model. You can see there it's like 19 meg. It's a really big model. And some impact analysis and attributes around each of the different subject areas. And then we've also got some sample data files and load scripts down the bottom. So that's for loading. You can see there's actually CRM and telco represented in here. We've also got the scripts to create the indexes, and IQ that specifically needs a lot of indexing to make it as performant as it is. And then we've got sample SQL reports, and they'll come in handy once we've deployed the full model. So let's go back to our documentation. I've actually got it open here already. So it's a 28-page guide, and the first part of it here, you can see there talks about key business questions, the sample analytics that are involved. You can see it's actually really useful if you're in that industry. But then after that, you can see here in the appendix, we have the steps about how to then deploy this analytic content. So creating a sample database, creating the schema, loading the sample data, and then what if you want to build that on other database platforms? We'll cover that in a second, because there's a couple of different options you have, depending on what you have involved, what you have in your organization. But if we just jump down to page 16, let's have a look at here. I used Sybase IQ. I had to install it as a trial to deploy this analytic content, but it was quite easy to access the trial and to get this set up. One of the first things you need to do once you've installed the trial is to log on to the Sybase Control Center, which I've already got open here. And we need to create a new database. There's a step-by-step instruction in the guide. This took me a little playing around with, because I'm not as familiar with IQ as I'd like to be. But you can see it here in the SEC, I've actually created a new database called Telco. It's got 4 gig allocation for the data size. And you can see here, if I go to tables, I've actually already run all my creation and indexing scripts. So there'll be all the tables listed here as part of the analytic content. You can see here, for example, choose a different one. So let's choose the core EBT sum. You can see there it's got 3,700 records. And if we just maybe want to look at the top, you can see there the results. So we've got data in there. So once we've created the database, let's go back to our documentation. We created the sample database, so it's empty at the moment. It talks you through how to do that with Sybase Central. You need to also create an OWC connection to it, which I've already done. I won't go through that process. It's well documented there, and it's great. The next thing we need to do is generate the schema for our sample database. So that's provided for us, if I go back to the top level, this PDM file here. So again, I installed a trial of PowerDesigner. That's not it. Alright, let me just open up here. So here is that model. Now you can see here all the different parts of the model. It's really extensive. So if we go to maybe generic core here, and we open that up, just zoom out a bit, you can see there's a subject area, and it's just one of many that are included in this model. So all that's set up there is, if we maybe go into this one, and we go into maybe the call summary, and we open that one up here, and this time we'll zoom in, what we can see is we have all our fact tables and dimension tables. We've got aggregate tables. They all have the technical columns defined, the column types, everything we need to actually create this model. There's some steps we have to do in PowerDesigner in terms of just making sure the foreign key constraints will be correct. So there's some instructions here that I've already run through on mine. The other thing is that they've just used a generic owner for all tables. You can see here underscore owner. So what you need to do is actually go through and do some find and replaces in the PowerDesigner model. And then once you've done that, you can actually go through the database generation. So if I click over to my PowerDesigner view and I was to click database, generate database, you can see here you can generate all the SQL necessary, and you've got lots of options around what parts you generate, whether you generate views, keys, tables and columns, all that kind of thing. So the documentation will walk you through what options you need to choose, and then what will happen is you will generate, I'll go to find that, we'll actually generate the SQL. Let's have a look at this one here. So you can see there's all the tables, all the drop statements. Statements. Right. And then creation of tables, and then comments on those tables as well. So complete robust SQL generation. What I'll do is, so I've already run through that DDL and I've executed that SQL in my Sybase IQ. You can see here actually in the DDL. The next thing after creating all those tables is then loading the sample data. That's all provided in the Analytic Bundle as well. So if we come down here, there's some sample data files for every table. You can see there, some of them are quite big, 30 meg in that one. What you're provided with is a batch file and also a SQL file. So let's take a look at these two. Again, I've already run through these, but you can see here there's just a connection statement to the database and then referencing that SQL. So you can either run it that way if you want, or you can even use the interactive SQL for IQ and actually load the SQL file directly. You can see there is it's truncating all tables, and then it's loading this table from that CSV file with some delimited options. Now, the only thing is I found that these percentage signs weren't commenting out, and so it was causing some errors. So if you just replace those with a double dash, so dash dash, you can do a find replace, you can see that then comments out that line. So that was just one of the little things I found while working through this. Once you've loaded all your files, the next step is to create your indexes. These are more straightforward, and again there's a batch file that references the SQL file to call, but if you can also run the SQL files individually too. You can see here this is pretty straightforward, just doing some creation of the HG index, and there's different types of indexes in Sybase IQ that are all created. You can see them all there as well. So if we were to reference the batch file, you can see it actually does them in order: HG, HNG, keys and LF index types. So that obviously that took me a little while. It's quite a bit more work than the other analytic bundle, but following the documentation and not being as familiar with IQ, I was still able to complete it all. The documentation then goes on to describe all of that, and then it also talks about what you could also look at doing if you wanted to change the target database. You can see here. So PowerDesigner supports a lot of different databases, and obviously the SQL it generates, how it creates the tables, the column types, all of that is dependent on the database. PowerDesigner supports a whole heap. So what you can do, you can see there it talks about changing the current database. If we just have a look at some of the options there, change current database. You can see here we're using Sybase IQ, but it also supports all of these. Some of the key ones to call out is HANA, Teradata, SQL Anywhere, Sybase ASE, SQL Server, Microsoft is supported, of course, using 2012, lots of different types. So you could generate this complete data model for each of those databases. Now, it does talk about in the documentation that by doing that, it actually changes quite a lot of how the tables relate to each other and how the model works. So it is probably a bit of a trial and error process that you need to work through in terms of getting that correct. So the other option I wanted to mention is you could deploy a trial. Hopefully this doesn't impact any licensing, but deploy a trial of IQ and PowerDesigner. You could deploy all the target tables with indexes and everything into IQ like I've already done. And then you could use the data services option if that is something that's part of your landscape. So data services workbench provides the ability to replicate from IQ to a lot of different target databases very simply. So I won't go through the process, but suffice to say, let's say I wanted to get all my data into HANA, I could call up a workbench, choose that telco database. You can see here in the control center we've got a lot of tables. I'd just be able to tick all of those tables and say I want to replicate those to HANA. Click go and it will do it for me very quickly. So you have two options there, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. You could either use PowerDesigner to create the model to generate in there, then load the data there manually, and that would probably take you a bit longer. Or you could also use this approach in terms of just loading it straight into IQ and then doing a replication from IQ into your target database if you do have data services available. So that's getting the underlying data model and data set in place. What do we have then in terms of being able to then do some analysis? So let me just open up back to our Analytic Bundle. You can see here we've also got sample SQL reports. If we look at something like campaign, here is lots of different SQL statements that let us do analysis of that data. Sorry, so let me just... All right. Why don't we open up Interactive SQL and see if we can run one of these. So I'm just going to open up a SQL file. You can see here, let's just choose the first one. So it gives us a description of it. This is a positive response profile analysis by household. As you can see here, all the SQL statements are again written with that generic owner of the table, so we do need to find and replace that. And you can see here it tells us some details. It's a template, and then we could use that if we were going forward and loading our own production data in. So let's just first of all just do a find and replace, and we want to replace owner with telco. I've already done it before, you can see. So let's just replace that, and then see what happens. So you can see here we've got global advertising, brochure requested, and then the number of households for the year and quarter. Let's try a different one. So I'm going to try a different subject area, so maybe let's look at customer care and customer complaint analysis. Again, we need to do that find and replace. And you can see here we actually get quite a bit more detail. So we've got things like an hour range, a region, the person, the date, and the complaint, and if it's closed or not. So that's quite a useful statement. So let's just grab that, because now I want to look at how we can extend this into using the rest of the business object suite. So I'm going to copy that statement, and I'm going to open up predictive analysis. Now I'm not going to use predictive functionality, but I just want to use the underlying Lumira engine to do some visualization. One of the great things about Lumira is you can do a direct JDBC connection to any type of JDBC driver. Sybase IQ is one, so we can connect to IQ and run this SQL statement. Okay, so let's do a new document, and you can see here we've got freehand SQL, and you can see I don't have some of my JDBC drivers loaded, but if we go down here, we do for Sybase IQ JDBC. So we can put in our details. We're interested in localhost 269, I believe. And you can see now that that is validated. Good, because I'd forgot the port number, so I'm glad I remembered it. That's okay, so let's go acquire. And now we are able to enter our SQL statement. I can paste it in there, but you can see here I can also build it by referencing the tables directly, and they're under the Telco database owner, so it'll be right at the bottom. And they're all the tables. So let's preview that data set. You can see there's the information, so we'll go ahead and acquire that. What else could you do with that, with this analytic content? Well, of course, because you've got all those SQL statements, there'd be a little bit of work, but you could analyze them to actually start generating a universe from them. But there's also something else we could use to generate the universe. First of all, though, let's come back to this. So I'm interested in the contact count as my measure. So let's create that as a measure. And I think that's about it. Of course, with Lumira, we have this facet view, and that's really useful for seeing what kind of analysis you could do. So you can see we've got dates, we've got the day name and the hour range. So maybe let's look at something like the number of complaints per day split by the hour. And of course we could do some sorting there, or we could rank it. Maybe it's interesting is looking at the descending values. So most complaints happen on a Monday. Oh, look at that. Actually, Thursday is as low as Sunday. That's interesting. And then the hour range is something we could look at as a legend color. And of course we could make that into a stacked column to actually see the breakdown. We can see most of our complaints are happening in the early morning. So the other thing we can do is actually use PowerDesigner. Let me just open that up again, to create our business objects universe on the fly. Let's just open it up and open up our PowerDesigner model again. So this option only exists if you already have the business objects client tools, and it needs BI4 Service Pack 4 as a minimum. You have to have those client tools installed on the same computer for it to recognize business objects tools there and actually be able to generate the model into a universe. You can see here we can go Tools, SAP Business Objects, Generate Universe. So you can see now it's listed there. Just you need to actually choose personal connection type instead of shared. So I just ran through it again. So I'll choose that existing connection. You can see here we can choose which objects to generate. Of course, we'll need to change the owner later on. We have the option to expand fact date columns. I don't want to do that. Primary keys. And we can click on to open it. We'll click finish. And so once we run through the universe creation, we could then open that universe, modify it as required, and then publish it into our system. We could convert it to a BI4 universe as well, and then begin using some of the features that are specific to the BI4 universe. So hopefully that's been a good coverage of what's included in the analytics data model. I know SAP are working on several other data models. specifically around this type of design. We're using a PowerDesigner model. It's obviously much more complete and gives you a much better platform than the insurance one we looked at, which is really just the data model without any sample queries and so on. This is really a more complete industry model. So hopefully you've enjoyed our time looking at the analytic bundles. Again, you can access them all here on the analytic content samples page. The link will be in the show notes. And if you have any suggestions of what else would be good to cover, please let me know. Thanks for joining us today.
This podcast is hosted and sponsored by EV Technologies. Visit us on the net at savethecms.com. DSLayer!